What's up YouTube, Capital G here talking about Chemical Beast in this video, or I guess really just the Gemini mechanic as a whole, and asking the question, should Konami give Geminis a huge colossal buff? I'm talking of the level of make an archetype where almost every monster has a broken or busted ass effect. And I know that's gonna sound fucking ridiculous. People are like, oh come on Cap, that's how you end up with Dragon Rulers where you get an entire archetype where every monster is so good Konami has to ban it. And yeah, like every Dragon Ruler was banned at one point or currently is. And even if you look at like Performages, you know, another archetype that has a very low monster count but all the monsters are like really good, there's a couple of stinkers in there. Every archetype has a couple of cards where you're just like, okay, well, I'm not even gonna blame Konami. Like, this is just the obligatory has to suck card. But the thing is, and this is why I'm advocating such a radical overhaul of the Gemini mechanic. The Gemini mechanic, guys, is still just one that sucks. There, I said it. Like, I don't know if you guys have any first-hand experience with Chemical Beast. I mean, there may be a couple of kids at your locals who might pick up the cards at the sneak peek and might play them or whatever. But if you actually play this deck, you will learn very fast. It is really fucking underwhelming. Like, I am borderline going to say that Chemical Beasts are kind of unsavable at this point because they're just so fucking bad, and it really feels like if you don't have Catalyst Field, you can't do anything in this deck. And honestly, some of that doesn't even have to do with the fact that they're Geminis. Konami just, like, the structure of this deck is just fucking, I hate using this word, but it's like fucking retarded. Like, some of the monsters are level 2s, some of them are 8s, their attributes being all over the place. Okay, I kind of get that because they're supposed to be chemicals and shit, but why are some of them 8s? Why are some of them 2s? Like, still making high level, you know, Geminis doesn't really make sense at this point, regardless of this card, because sometimes you don't have Spark Field, or it gets fucking Twin Twisted or MST'd, and you get these fucking 8s stuck in your hand and you can't do anything with them. Obviously, you're not about to tribute for these motherfuckers, so it makes you run dumb shit like trade in, and then it just makes, like, you get these stupid brick hands with this deck. I play this deck a lot. It's so fucking terrible, and I really wanted it to be good, because whether you guys know it or not, like, Konami is trying to revive. They're actively trying to revive certain mechanics in the game. We saw it with the Union mechanic. Like, Konami did a brilliant job, maybe too good of a job, where ABC is like hands down the best deck in the entire game, and you see them trying to revive the spirit mechanic. They haven't really released any spirit since kind of like Zexal, Legacy of the Valiant, and Shadow Specters and shit like that. They got the spirits coming out of Raging Tempest, and now they got these guys kind of reviving the Gemini mechanic. And the reason I kind of say unsavable is because I don't know if Gemini, like, or excuse me, Chemical Beasts are getting more cards, because it's kind of weird. I don't think they have any cards in Raging Tempest. I know Crystons are getting more cards in Raging Tempest, and these guys both came out in the same set, so it's kind of weird that like one of them would get more support and one of them would not. But the thing about it is, the Gemini mechanic, it's not like it's bad now, or this is just a bad design archetype. Like, it's always been a bad mechanic. Even if you go to like the most successful Gemini decks at like the regional or even like the YCS level throughout Yu-Gi-Oh's history, I mean, you're pretty much going to see just like, you know, Gemini stun, you know, decks like this where you just ran a bunch of vanilla ass like 1900 monsters, and you use things like skill drain to just basically floodgate out decks like X Sabers and whatnot, decks that had little monsters that basically wanted to, you know, spam the board. Well, okay, if I throw this Neos Alias or the Neos Alias on the board and I basically beat the fuck out of you with a 1900 monster, we're playing Caveman Yu-Gi-Oh! And I mean, you guys have seen how effective what like Cleaford is when they've got 2800 monsters and they flip skill drain over, and it's like, oh crap, my monsters are all little, but they have good effects, but skill drain has no effect. So yeah, even if you look at the most successful Gemini decks, like, they weren't ran because the monster effects were good. Like, have you ever seen anybody actually Gemini summon a Neos Alias? Like, no. And this card has seen a lot of play throughout the years. It was pretty much just because of things like Gemini Spark, avoiding Bottomless Trap Hole and Torrential, and, you know, Skill Drain was just a natural fit in the deck because no one really gives a fuck about Gemini effects. And I think a lot of that is because even when you do spend so much time and energy into trying to get the fucking Gemini summon off, it's just underwhelming. Like the only card I can think of that had a really good impact on the meta was something like Gigaplant, where people would kind of play like Supervise, or they would call it like Gigavise. That was actually a pretty decent one. But for the most part, guys, all of the other cards that Konami has released that have been Geminis, they're just really underwhelming. And I don't know, like, I'm not trying to say I had unreal expectations, because, you know, I don't want to make an unfair comparison and say, well, this deck should have been as good as ABC, because if they made Unions this good, then obviously, you know, Geminis haven't been shit since the 5Ds era. They should have made this as good as that. No, I just at least wanted, like, I guess my expectations of a deck is to at least have like Sir Tellarknight power. You know, whether you notice or not, Sir Tellarknight's actually topped a regional like last fucking week. That deck came out 2 years ago, and it can still top regionals now. What does that say about Sir Tellarknights? It tells you that a deck like Tellarknights or Burning Abyss decks from Duelist Alliance have been able to stand the test of time. This deck can't even top a Neo CG, and I think it has no chance of topping in a TCG. And, you know, I feel like for a Gemini archetype, right? Like, even if you would hypothetically to give them busted ass effects in every single monster, you still have to look at the bigger picture. You still have to look at the fact that you have to normal summon this damn thing twice. You know what I mean? In Yu-Gi-Oh! 2016, guys, you guys know how fast the game is. And if you look at some of the cards that stun your opponent for one turn, how big of an impact do they make? Like, look at some practical applications like Max C against a deck like Dart Synchro, or against a deck like Mermaid, where they're like, fuck, I can't really go off because I'm under Max C. What if I don't kill him? I'm going to lose the game. Like, stunning Mermaid for that one turn can basically win you the duel. Like, if you flip over Dimension Barrier against Burning Abyss and you make it so they can't exceed that one turn, it's huge. You know, if you flip over Anti-Spell Fragrance against even like a deck like ABC, where they now have to set their Union Hanger and they aren't able to get to their ABC and do all of their plays, you know what I mean? I'm basically just showcasing or saying that one turn in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is such a big deal. And is it ever like reasonable to expect someone to summon a vanilla monster, hope it survives, and then summon it again, hope it survives that summon, and then just get kind of an average effect? Like, no, you'd want a fucking broken, oh my god, it wins me the fucking game level effect, because you have to understand, first off, keeping a monster on board that's not like a fucking Kieran or a Magispector is difficult to begin with. It's not like, you know, a Dart Destroyer or some shit. Just keeping one monster on the board protected is difficult in Yu-Gi-Oh! To begin with. And number two, every time you normal summon that, you are opening yourself up to things like Bottomless or Torrential Tribute or Solemn Warning, because let's just say you normal summon your, you know, your crab or whatever, and then your opponent sets the warning. If you try to Gemini summon it, they can actually warning it. So your monster is even more susceptible than any other monster, because you have to commit that summon twice. And it just, eating up the normal summon is such a big deal when you've got monsters like, you know, fucking Starsaurus that you can normal summon one chair, or excuse me, one stick. And if you have chair in your hand, next thing you know, off of one normal summon, you get like a fucking Deltaros, you get to pop like 2 cards, draw like 3 cards. Like, it's mind-blowing and it's game-breaking. And like, I feel like these guys, they would have been an okay deck if they were released like 7 years ago. Like, I don't even think if they would have released these smacked at the beginning of like Teledad, like, it wouldn't even been broken. They would have probably got shit on by Teledad. So releasing them in 2016 is like, what? These aren't even as powerful as Tellarknights that came out like 2.5 years ago. So what do you guys think? Because I don't see a way that Konami can fix the Gemini mechanic. Like, you can't really just inherently change it. I mean, don't get me wrong, they can make cards like Sparkfield that makes it easier to Gemini summon. You know, you can just Gemini summon immediately or supervise. But if the monster effects aren't mind-blowingly good, is the risk even worth the reward? I'm a risk reward player. Like, if you're going to normal summon twice and risk yourself, or risk the Bottomless and the Solemn twice, like, I damn sure want a monster that's going to pay me back with an amazing effect. Like, if you normal 10 Goldfish and then you special summon a Gigabyte or a Dragoons or whatever, and you go for that Bahamut Shark Totally Awesome play and you get warninged, I'm not going to fault you for that. Even if your opponent had a double back row, because I see the play you were going for, the play that could completely give you, you know, control over the board. So I'm like, yeah, you risked it, but your risk, like, had it paid off, you'd have probably won the duel. With none of these, like, none of the Gemini cards of like the last 10 years can you really say that about any of those cards. So I don't know. I feel like For them to build a Gemini archetype that has any type of success, like this guy would have to be like fucking a Cosmojo, this guy would have to be a fucking Regeki, this one would have to be like a Pantheism, this one would have to be like a fucking Snatch Steal, and then this one would have to be like an evac. And even all of that, it would still feel really fucking slow, because let's just say that, you know, you had Sparkfield. If you didn't have Sparkfield, even though they all had broken ass effects built into them, they would still feel very, very fucking vulnerable. Like, I'm gonna summon my 1800 vanilla and just pray to God it lives. Like, that's just not a valid win condition, man. Like, that just doesn't happen in Yu-Gi-Oh! You know what I mean? That's why ABCs are so good, because it doesn't fucking matter if your guys die or not. You contact Fuse from the graveyard. You know what I mean? So let me know what you guys think. I want there to be a viable Gemini deck. And again, I'm not asking for broken level. I'm just asking for a deck that can at least compete on the regional level. Like, do not try and convince me in the comments that Chemical Beast can top regionals. I do not fucking believe it. I've played this deck extensively. If you don't open with Sparkfield, you are doing nothing with this deck, man. So, I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you have not already. I know I said that was the end of the video, but it was kind of like one more point that I was thinking about, right? And there was this thing that I was talking to Glasgow a while back about, where he said that normal monsters kind of sucked, and he thought that you should just be able to normal summon all normal monsters. And I was like, well, why do you think that? And he was like, because normal monsters suck. They're just, you know, they're not better than effect monsters in pretty much any way or any circumstance other than a couple of cards. And I was like, you know what? I think that actually makes sense. Like, if you could just normal summon a Blue Eyes, like, would that make Blue Eyes the deck broken? Like, I don't think so. It just kind of make it a lot better. The deck would brick a lot less when their alternative gets solemn. They'd actually have, like, you know, plays and whatnot. But I actually think, to put it into perspective, I kind of feel like Geminis are worse than normals. And people might be like, how can Geminis be worse than normals, Cap? They have potential effects. Like, you have to think about it like this. Like, the way I look at it is, the reason Geminis are even worse than normals is because to get the maximum potential out of a Gemini monster, or to get, excuse me, I'll talk about the normals first. To get the maximum potential out of a normal monster, all you have to do is just normal summon it. There is no effect, so you just normal summon it and attack. To get the maximum potential out of a Gemini monster, you have to normal summon it twice. That means that there is twice as much risk, and outside of a couple of cards, which I don't think it's relevant to lean on the argument of Catalyst Field or things like Supervise, because that's like 2 cards and this mechanic is like how old? You know what I mean? Without those cards, you basically have to normal summon that bitch, wait for your opponent's turn, hope it somehow survives, and then come back to your turn and normal summon it again, where obviously there's twice as much risk because your opponent gets another opportunity to respond to that summon. But in addition, you just have to leave that monster up and somehow it has to make it through your opponent's turn. So it's like, to me, that's even worse than like a normal monster.